Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and happy Friday, first of all. Um, my name's Sam Brown. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at here. I'd like to thank the guys at iGaming Next for inviting me here today. And we're going to have an open discussion about the recently announced acquisition between two of, arguably the largest suppliers in our industry. So we are, of course, talking about Evolution's plans to acquire NetEnt. So in order to kick things off, we need some participants for our discussion. So if you would like to participate with me today in the roundtable, please use your hop-in dashboard and join the conversation. Welcome, Pierre.
Hey, thank you, Sam. Hopefully it'll be interesting to see if anyone wants to join us today for the discussion. Let me ask you then, Sam, because I'm quite interested to hear your kind of analyze on the merger. What are your thoughts in general?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, having worked in NetEnt and in their running their live casino business for a couple of years, it was kind of it did surprise me a little bit, actually. I know that rumor has it that Evolution had missed out on the opportunity to purchase Red Tiger, and I think it was a poorly kept secret that they were in the market for a slots partner. But I think looking at the two companies and the setup of the two companies, the mentality of the companies, the success of the two companies, for me, I think it's really exciting. I think there's a lot of, if I always kind of sort of view these things primarily from the point of view as a gambler and a player, and I think that when you've got sort of two industry leaders here, the potential, I think, to start building some kind of insanely entertaining products is definitely there, and that for me is really exciting. And then also, we have to sort of, I guess, go back to almost the beginning of the industry, where there was a couple of major suppliers who covered the full sort of portfolio, and then obviously the more recent trend has been to be sort of more hyper specialized in different areas. And I think you can't deny that probably a huge part of Evolution's success has been on the back of the fact that they are so specialist in what they do, and they've just optimized and increased their distribution, increased their markets, the regulated markets, and made some smart strategic smaller acquisitions to give themselves good market position. So what's interesting to understand is, will it be a distraction when it suddenly becomes a portfolio business? Does that will they take their eye off the ball? The business becomes a lot more complicated in all facets, and I guess the big question for the investors will be whether there's whether those sort of the headwinds that those companies can have a sort of multiple on one another to really go into an even more hyper growth, or whether it'll slow the business down in the short term as they try and deal with these kind of two mega infrastructures trying to kind of connect. So yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting unanswered questions.
Yeah,
for sure.
There's like if I look at like the gaming market recently, it's hard to find a comparison to when an organization who is so laser focused on a niche within the industry then kind of enters another part of the market. But on the B2C side, the only one that comes to mind is PokerStars. Would be the only ones who were laser focused on poker for many years, and is now kind of building the casino side. I mean, they managed to so far, I guess, to do it successfully. I don't know. Do you see? Is there anything that can be compared to the journey that Evolution Gaming is on now? Do you think?
Not really. I don't think there's, as I say, you kind of have to go back to the days of perhaps a Playtech when they were when they had this full suite of products and were able to command exclusive distribution rights and things, and but that, as I say, that quickly became unfavorable to most of the operators. Yeah, as you say, there are some niche operators who have expanded their portfolios out. The other one you could obviously consider would be Betfair, which was for many years just a very niche betting exchange, and then has since become a much more mass market business and much more multi-product business, and of course has also been a huge success, which then obviously now results in collaboration with the Stars Group as well. So it's just, I think it's probably the biggest, the most interesting deal that we've seen in a really long time. And I think there's some sort of big questions that need to be answered, some obvious synergies, and then some less obvious synergies. I think the one that surprised me a little bit was the distribution, because they're very similar companies from a distribution perspective. You thought that perhaps an RNG provider with a more Asian focused or US focused distribution, it could have been potentially interesting. Something maybe not biting off the biggest guys with the first acquisition, maybe going for something along the lines of a Red Tiger, where they could sort of cut their teeth a little bit with a smaller game studio. But they don't do things by halves, and you have to admire them for that.
There's some very smart people behind the doors who have figured this out.
Exactly, there's some incredibly smart, talented people behind both businesses, and I think one of the most exciting things for me is that they're both incredibly innovative. They do focus on the player and the quality of the experiences for the player, and for me, I'm probably most excited about the products that will spin off from the collaboration between those product teams once they get their head around the initial challenges.
Because I was thinking about this too. You mentioned which game supplier they would acquire, and the cards fell on NetEnt. Was that? I mean, it was not surprising that Evolution was about to acquire a games provider, but were you surprised that it was NetEnt, or?
Yes, I was a bit surprised, as I said, because of the scale, and because that from a distribution perspective, they have been sort of competing pretty much head to head. I think NetEnt has probably the best regulated distribution from a very strong European base, and Evolution's almost is very similar. And a limited exposure to Asia versus some of the others. I think
So why
Evolution.
Do you think the card fell on? I mean, because yes, it's a quite obvious thing. They have the same distribution, so there must be something else than that they are. That of course fell. Is it the expertise within the organization? I mean, NetEnt have a quite big turnaround within their C-level teams. They mentioned obviously that the US is a key market, and there's some synergies there from NetEnt side, that they are strong in their infrastructure there. Is that a big reason, you think, or?
Yeah, I think US has to be the sort of overarching reason if you're looking at the future of those businesses, because the distribution, Evolution pretty much has a monopoly on live distribution now that they have control of Izugi, and NetEnt was very quick to get in that space and win good market share as well. So I see for them, if there was a market where they could draw the product, where they could package the products together and provide a sort of one-stop casino solution to partners in the US market, that's the market that they could probably do that in, because of the limited competition that they have there. So yeah, undoubtedly, and all we know that Evolution and NetEnt, the fact that they're in there means that they are very bullish about that market. It's not one. It's not a light decision to go into the US, right? So, the fact that they probably think there's a huge amount of growth opportunity, which I think the market would agree with.
Yeah, and I mean it's a long-term strategy, I guess. But I mean, even in that, there seems to be so much uncertainty in the US at the moment. I mean, there's election year that can go one out of either ways. That can change a lot of things depending on where the regulation will go. I mean, but like, what do you think, Sam, on the US in general?
I have to admit I'm not an expert in the US market. It's not, I've never really sort of been too heavily involved in that side. I think we've all been waiting a long time for for each of the states to sort of topple one by one. But now when you you see the market reports now, obviously things have been quite slow on the regulatory side in the US for the best part of 5 years. But now if we look forward 5 years, the expectation is hyper growth in the US. There's a lot more markets, a lot more states. So as I say, I'm not the expert, but I do believe that now we're beginning to really see the bottom of that curve, and I think that's a lot of what this deal is probably relating to that market specifically.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the gaming industry after all. It's a high stakes game that is being played right now. Depending if the market opens up, it's obviously potentially massive market. And Todd Haushalter, I did a podcast with Todd Haushalter. He's the chief product officer of Evolution Gaming. He's born and raised in Vegas, and he said that he's surprised that online hasn't disrupted land-based more than it has so far. And he echoed that to just the reason for that is that obviously that is the regulators and the markets are holding this innovation back. But he said that it's kind of just a matter of time before this happens.
Yeah, I think so. And when you saw how quickly the sort of retail side of sports transitioned online, you would sort of naturally felt that online casino would follow, but it's never really had the same sort of pace. There's not really moved over. I think it's still kind of single digit growth as opposed to sort of 30-40% transition from the sports side. So it's still low penetration, especially in those markets like the US. And there are obviously some political reasons for that in the US. A lot of donations come from the land-based casino world towards presidential campaigns, and that slows things down specifically for the casinos.
And also the president being a casino owner himself, I guess.
Exactly, without mentioning any names, indeed. But no, I agree with Todd. It's not for a want of trying. I mean, there are operators and suppliers that are really kind of chomping at the bit to get in there and make a difference and transition players online, and it's just bureaucracy that's preventing that from happening right now.
Then it's another interesting thing in this as well. It's like I mean, certain operators obviously investing in the US quite heavily. I just spoke to Robin of GIG. I mean, they were one of the ones who really pushed hard towards the US, and it hasn't really paid off yet. Is it also one of the things that if to kind of hold back a little bit from that market, like what with Hero Gaming, for example? What are your thoughts on the US?
Yeah, I mean,
it's an expensive venture at the moment to establish yourself in that market earlier.
Yeah, I mean, you really need to be in a size bracket more significant than where Hero Gaming is to consider moves into that market. As I said, it's a really long game, and your shareholders really need to understand what they're getting themselves in for when they go into those markets. Similar happened with Kindred, where they kind of had to tell the main shareholders, you're not really going to make a return in the next 4 to 5 years if we have to spend our hundreds of millions of dollars breaking into this market. So again, it's for a mid-sized company like us with sort of fast growth aspirations, it's not particularly interesting. But I can see why for those huge companies, the GVCs, the Betfairs, the Hills, I can see why, of course, it's really important for their shareholders that they go in there and make a statement.
Yeah, for sure. But by the way, I saw I'm getting like some messages here that people are actually trying to join into the roundtable discussion, but there seems to be an error message some people are getting that the system can't find the device. So yeah, apologies for that. Obviously, we'll
yes, I saw
this
a
is
few
really
coming
interesting.
through.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw a few coming through, but yeah, we probably should have mentioned at the beginning it's our first time using this technology, so not the most polished performance so far.
Groundbreaking technology. You can join in and discuss.
Exactly.
But I'm enjoying this anyway. Like this is interesting discussion. There's a lot of people viewing us, so I mean let's go on for a while anyway. So I think this is fine if you're okay with that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Good. Yeah, so then obviously there's a lot of there's a lot of debate now on the valuation of NetEnt. Obviously there's like a 42% premium of the on the share that that Evolution is paying on a valuation of like 1.8 billion euro. NetEnt obviously traditionally like the last couple of years stock hasn't performed that well, but now, since mid-March, the stock has jumped like 150%, so something like that all of a sudden. Do you have a take on this in general, Sam? Do you have any?
Well, I think from you got to remember that at one point NetEnt was at sort of 2.3 billion market cap, and that wasn't a long time ago. And their revenue profile hasn't changed that significantly. NetEnt was always a company with a high PE. Like the market had really super high expectations on NetEnt, and then when the growth started to slow down, and that was because, I would guess, primarily because of market conditions. And when NetEnt pushed really hard to make the UK market a really big deal within their portfolio. It became their biggest market very, very quickly. And then we've seen what happened to the UK market. So that's going to stifle any sort of revenue growth. And those markets, that's the sort of risk reward you take when you work with heavily in those regulated spaces. And I think that, the market sort of understood that actually, without hyper growth, it's super overvalued. And then I think actually NetEnt came down to a much more reasonable expectation. But then I can also understand why you would pay a premium, because a premium like the one they've paid, yes, the multiple's high.
What was the multiple?
I think 23, something like that, 23, 24, which is enormous.
That's huge.
I may be that may be a little exaggerated, but it was a large multiple for where they are. But I think the important thing is that they're paying a 43% premium. And why do they need to do that? I think, when you have the growth and the position that Evolution has, they can afford to do that, to close a deal out quickly, and you saw how quickly they got sort of unanimous acceptance from the shareholder base at NetEnt, which means that maybe they went in a little high, maybe it was too quickly accepted, but I don't think they're going to lose any sleep over it. They understand their position and their strength, and they know growth is coming. They know that the market fit is good. it's tough to see where sort of too many of the cost synergies will be. But I think when it comes to, some of the revenue synergies and the distribution, that they, it makes sense as a deal. Although, could argue it's slightly overpriced, but I wouldn't say it was I wouldn't say it's a crazy deal. I think what NetEnt paid for Red Tiger was crazier.
Really? How so?
Yeah, I just think that was hugely overvalued and geared too much towards the cash end of the deal. Just my personal opinion, but I think that ultimately that's why Evolution didn't end up doing that deal, because they probably realized as well that they were going to need to overpay to fight NetEnt away from that deal, and ultimately they probably were effective in driving up the price to make it more expensive for NetEnt to acquire Red Tiger. But again, a really smart acquisition, and those companies are already both of those were strong suppliers for us at Hero Gaming, and they seem to have joined forces really well. They're already collaborating on games productions, and the technical integration seems to have been incredibly swift. And as I said, when you have sort of modern, innovative, and very sort of high-tech businesses like that coming together, things will happen quickly.
What about, so Carolina, hey Carolina, by the way, it's nice to see you here as well. She's asking a question. Do you think there will be a comeback of exclusivity deals now with even? Can you explain what that is better? Because I'm not, since I'm not from that world. To keep operators at, So
exactly.
That existed at some point, but it's not, the exclusivity deals aren't that prevalent any longer.
No, so this is how, I mean, Playtech got a huge amount of UK market share by saying, if you take this, you have to take this. And, everything comes as a package. And then you can, to a certain extent, you can flex your commercial muscles a lot more than you can if they're individual products. So do I think that those deals might come back? I think there are certain markets where that might happen. I struggle to see that happening in the sort of highly competitive, sort of Scandinavian, UK, German
the
market.
USA, you think?
USA, I think, is one where plausibly, because of the sort of early mover nature of those two and their excellent presence there already, that's one where you could argue that there's an opportunity for them to do something similar. But then they also have some very high performance and big sort of land-based and online sort of conglomerates to go up against there. So it would be an aggressive move, but I don't think it's something that's off the table. I find it hard for them to kind of pull that off in the mature and competitive markets in Europe, but potentially in some new regulated spaces, if they manage to get in there first in the next regulated market. They're both in early and in there quickly, and you have people wanting to launch fast, potentially.
Because now, because you mentioned Playtech as well, Sam, like now obviously Playtech is seen as not the friendliest brand, perhaps in some ways, and I know that they are trying to change its image at the moment because of their aggressive stance with these type of exclusivity deals and so forth. So do you think maybe it's even a lesson to be learned that maybe it's not a long-term strategy to go into the market like that?
Yeah, well, and just the way that the market behaved in general, where these products very quickly sort of split once other good suppliers came in that were specifically good at slots, which was NetEnt, and specifically good at live casino, which was Evolution. I mean, you've got to understand that the roots of both of these companies, they've fought really, really hard to break down those exclusive deals at Playtech and others. So it would be very interesting if they then, having broken those deals down and running a narrative of how poor those type of deals are to all of their their operators, it would probably be a bit rich to come back in and try and implement them themselves. But
yeah.
Who knows?
Exactly, who knows? So yeah, Christopher, yes, again, Christopher, sorry that the technology is not with us at the moment, but he's asking, could the deal possibly face some difficulty getting through European Union merger control, as it could be perceived as creating a bit of a monopoly? I personally don't think, I mean, NetEnt isn't really a monopoly in that regard. I mean, NetEnt is far from a monopoly on the game provider side. I mean,
yeah, I would agree with that with that summary. I think, you know, because of the nature of live casino, they probably have, my best guess would be 60+% of the European live casino market at Evolution. So had they have gone in for another European live casino business, that would probably have struggled a little bit. But the fact that it's a different vertical and it's a much more competitive vertical, I don't see them having too many problems getting the deal through.
What do you think NetEnt's market share is at the moment?
In Europe as a whole, I don't know, maybe 10%.
Yeah, exactly. So that would
something like that, 8 to 10.
Yeah, that would naturally not be. I mean, I guess what they're aiming for is to capture a larger part of the market. Obviously, this merger is setting NetEnt and Evolution Gaming up to create this like monster within the gaming industry. But they aren't necessarily there right now. They are just setting themselves up for being there at the later stage, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said before, when we look at Europe, where their sort of homeland is, they have almost identical distribution. It's very rare that you'll find an online casino that doesn't have NetEnt and Evolution already.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's where, from a distribution perspective in Europe, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of synergies. It's only, as Carolina mentions, if they were to somehow use that kind of egregiously to strong arm people into worse or more expensive deals and positions. But they could use it in a more friendly and optimum fashion, which is where they kind of see the cost synergies and maybe create a technical integration in the future that allows both products with one integration. You have to think that these things will be on the table for them in the future, and those type of things do give them, of course, really good opportunities.
Yeah, fair enough. Chris is following up here, by the way. It's a point I guess we both of us didn't think of it, which is the NetEnt Live side of their business. Did you see? He's mentioning that they are potentially the number 2 behind Evolution Gaming, and that would then create this monopoly situation on the live casino.
Well, the obvious number 2 is Playtech's live casino business. They're also huge. I mean, it's basically those 2 players, and then I would say at least 90% of the live casino market falls under, in Europe anyway, would fall underneath Evolution and Playtech, and everybody else is fighting for that last 10% and trying to expand that 10%. So the NetEnt Live business, I think, is interesting because it's a different type of technology, but I think they'll definitely benefit from the scale and operational excellence that Evolution's managed to achieve through lots of optimization, and the product fits nicely because NetEnt were early in creating non-liquidity products for live casino, and that's where the market's going, right? So more and more of these games which don't have fixed table liquidity are the ones that are leading out and growing and stretching the exposure of live casino, where players can now play for as low as 20 cents and €1, where before trying to find a bet under €5 was almost impossible, and hence did constrict somewhat the audience and the type of player that would enter the product. And I think NetEnt has some really good technology, again, some really good people, and a good opportunity to to collaborate and help develop even better live games going forward.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see. So Martin is also commenting that NetEnt might have 10% market share now, but Evolution Gaming have a very high market share in live casino, of course, meaning if people use Evolution Gaming, it might make a lot of sense to use their slots machines as well. But what we have been talking about is that they do have very similar distribution. So even though NetEnt has 10% market share on the slot machine side, and Evolution Gaming has much higher market share on the live casino side, they still have a similar distribution. It's just that there's a lot more competition within the games side, right?
Yeah. So it's the capex, the sunk cost of entering the live casino market makes it, reduces the competition. Whereas these days, that with a relatively low investment, you can launch a game studio, you can use an aggregation platform, and you can become a competitor if you hit one or two good math models and good games. So it's very hard to do that in the live casino world, to just spin up a studio and take some of Evolution's market share. So there are obviously some sort of natural or structural reasons why it's less competitive on the live side.
Yeah, true. All right, Sam, I think this is okay. Let's see. There's before I was thinking we probably have to go back to work, I guess, soon and things. But we are getting more interesting questions here now. Let's see. Rather than the benefit. Let's see. So Dagmara is commenting. For smaller live casino providers, it could be an opportunity as well, especially during COVID. More and more operators realize that they need diversity in their live casino portfolio, and it's good to have more than one provider who dictates the rules. Obviously, Dagmara herself coming from one of the live casino providers. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, and there are more that, despite the challenges of entering the market, there are more people entering, and there are products that are improving and competing. And I think sometimes we get very focused on Europe when we talk about the power of the likes of Evolution, and but if you go into the Asian market, it's totally different landscape. There are huge numbers of well, not huge numbers, but much larger numbers of live casino suppliers who are doing just mind-blowing amounts of volume and bet spots and numbers of tables and so on. So it's a different landscape for sure. But yeah, I think that any the good thing about any small live casino provider is that hopefully you have the agility to turn anything into an opportunity. But when we should there be a scenario where Evolution were to take their eye off the ball because they were spending a lot of time trying to technically bring platforms together, bring people together, bring operations together, there's probably a few opportunities there for people to sort of slip in and introduce products at a faster pace. But it's tough. They're a tough competitor to eat away at. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Shall we take I read James' question here, really interesting actually. Shall we take that as the last question today, Sam, if that's okay with you?
Sure.
In this spontaneous Q&A session. So James has a really interesting point. I love this question actually. So he's saying rather than the benefit for NetEnt and Evolution Gaming to be together, let's try to see the other face of the coin. Who will be suffering from this synergy in the medium term amongst their competitors? Maybe Playtech or the newcomers or the smaller games providers. Well, what do you think? Is there anyone who will take damage from this?
I mean, I think that it all, as I say, it depends. I think the short term it's hard to say. Medium term, which is obviously a much better thing to focus on. Yeah, I think that potentially big competitors like Playtech could get harmed here because that there is an opportunity here for them to accelerate away using their distribution in their sort of core markets. I also think that, as I say, in markets like, for example, the US, where their position is strong, it's going to make it much harder for any supplier side companies who are thinking of going in and attacking that market. I think that puts them in a very dominant position collectively to offer market leading products and services into places like the US. So it would probably hurt people considering entry into some of those regulated spaces.
Yeah, fair enough. Great, guys. It's some super interesting questions going. So it's a shame that that it wasn't possible for more people to join us now, but really nonetheless, I would say, Sam, and just thank you as well for doing this today and joining us for the first Power Hour. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this discussion in general?
No, just to say thank you for having me, and I enjoyed the conversation. I wasn't expecting to have the conversation, but enjoyed it nonetheless, and hopefully it was interesting for those people who tuned in. So thanks to everyone who took the time to tune in and listen.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sam. I'm looking forward to talking to you more in the coming weeks and whatnot. It's super interesting to listen to. So, yeah, thank you, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a great weekend. Thank you.